Hello, everyone. It's 11 a.m. on the dot, and very warm welcome to our Women in Sectional Title webinar. It's so lovely to see all of you here, and I think we're going to have a really, really good chat. Although the subject might be a little bit somber, I think that just having you here all under one roof on one platform is an enormous advantage. So thank you. And we wouldn't be here, of course, without our wonderful sponsors. Thank you to Zfin, Sectional Title Solutions, We Connect You, PKF Octagon, and most recently to Multiprof. Thanks so much. In the coming months, you'll be seeing more and more of our sponsors, our sort of sponsorship content on our webinars. And I think it's so important because our sponsors are actually on the ground. They're working, they know what should be a top of mind, and debating topics with them and really fleshing out these type of things is a very good thing for our webinar at the moment. And I see Aubrey's also there from Multiprof. Welcome, Aubrey. So ultimately, before we go into our topic for today, I wanted to mention something to you. I think it'll be a really good thing for us as the women in sectional title and the men who support us to bring together a couple of resources on this platform. And one of the resources that I'd like to talk about before we start are good books to read, because obviously reading is gaining knowledge and knowledge is power. Every day I talk to so many women, portfolio managers, trustees, all day, every day. And at the moment, my feeling is that women are stressed. It's a stressful time. We've got really the economic times not so great. People don't have money to spend, and of course you still have the demands of family life. I've just read an incredible book, so pick up your pens. I want to talk to you about it quickly. It's by Dr. Peter Attia, A-T-T-I-A, Dr. Peter Attia, and the book is called Outlive, O-U-T-L-I-V-E, and it's just about gaining a better quality of life for longer. He talks about doctors medicating all of us until we're really old, because the medical profession wants to see people living a long time. And often that is not really what the aim of life should be. And Dr. Peter Attia, from a scientific point of view, takes us through step by step how to prolong life, but how to bring quality of life to all of us. So please do yourselves a favor. I thought it was fantastic. It's great. We want healthier trustees, healthier owners, healthier managing agents, and healthier buildings at the end of the day. So, all right, let's go into why we're here today. And we're talking about the risks of insolvency for sectional title buildings. The question that we need to ask is, could body corporate trustees be unwittingly steering their body corporates towards insolvency? I mean, you might have everything operating very smoothly on the surface, but when you look carefully at the records of a complex, they reveal a very different situation, and often something that's quite disastrous. So we need to talk about this. And joining us today, we've got people who are two guys who are really, really familiar to all of you. Mike Addison from Addsure and Alistair Scholtz from PKF Octagon. Welcome, both of you. I think we need to talk about shedding light on why trustees don't really grasp their obligations in terms of refinancing arrear levies and renovating a complex, and what it means for a complex to actually be insolvent. So I'd like to start with Alistair. Alistair, talk us through what is the sort of most basic definition of insolvency for our schemes?
Okay, first of all, thanks, Marina. Thank you for having us this morning. So insolvency at its most basic, or the most simplest explanation I can give you, is it's your inability to pay your debts. Okay, the body corporate is not able to meet its financial obligations. If we want to look at it from a more sort of accounting point of view, your liabilities on our balance sheet or the statement of financial position, they exceed the available assets. So there's two kinds we can look at here. We have a balance sheet insolvency, which is what I've just mentioned to you. Your liabilities exceed the assets. So in body corporate terms, we really have two types of assets. You've got your debtors, your levies and arrears, and cash in the bank. that is less than your payables, less than what you owe your creditors. So that's the first type. Second type is we can have a cash flow insolvency, where on paper your body corporate is solvent, so you have your assets exceed your liabilities, but it's not being realized quickly enough to settle your debts on time. So that's a cash flow insolvency. That generally leads us on to a second point, if if we want to refer back to financial statements in particular, where we talk about the going concern, and this is often linked to insolvency. Again, that question of going concern, question we're asking or checking is, does the body corporate have the financial means to continue its business? And I say business because we should regard it as a business, even if it's non-profit making, for the foreseeable future. That would fall into the definition of a going concern. And what we generally fall back on, the industry, is we'll say, oh, the trustees have the ability to raise special levies, and therefore it's fine, we meet the going concern principle. So in a nutshell, those are the two issues we're looking at, insolvency and going concern. I'll just elaborate a little bit, and how we would generally fall into insolvency is one of two things. It's either poor or inadequate bad management and poor financial controls. So your budgets that are not thought out carefully enough, it's just poor budgeting. You have expenditure that exceeds available income. Very importantly, a poor debt collection process. And one which I'll touch on maybe a little bit later, people often forget the income side of that, is that they don't raise the full complement of income that should be raised, and that creates a shortfall on its own. And then in terms of bad management, trustees that sit on boards that have their personal interests at heart, people that are not suitably qualified to hold those positions, that are giving instructions to the managing agents, and then routine maintenance not being done would be, in my opinion, it's bad management. Mike, I'm sure we'll touch on that later. And then just a big one here, Marina, which I think people overlook. To me, I almost consider bad management owners not giving restrictions or to the trustees at an AGM, and I'll also touch on that a bit later. That's a big one that can curb uncontrolled expenditure.
Thank you. Thanks, Alistair. So, Mike, you are the chap who alerted us to this issue, actually, and I think it's because you've got so much knowledge around the insurance side of things. And I was quite motivated by your concern to put this webinar together. So tell us, from your point of view, practically give us an example of how body corporate can just sort of slip into this position of insolvency.
Okay, hi everybody, and again, Marina, just to repeat what Alistair said, thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here, and join WIST. Very, very, very great opportunity. Just on that point, so we do insurance. So one of the things we do as a service is that we invite our managing agent clients to, when there's an AGM coming up, to send us the AGM pack to have a look at, so we can work out the fidelity figures, or help them work out or check their fidelity figures. And in so doing, we cast our eyes over the financial statements, and particularly what I call old-fashioned word, balance sheet. And when you're looking at this, that Bitmoji comes to mind, that gasping one with his hand, and I started thinking, wow, assets are half of these liabilities, and that puts them in a technical insolvent position. And I look at the risks associated with that, because being in insurance, you always look at a risky thing. If I walk past a building, somebody else might look, oh, it's nice paint. When I look at the risks, is there a handrail, etc. And when I look at a financial statement, obviously I look at the insurance risks, and I ask myself, if a body corporate is technically insolvent, is there a problem? And I have got a banking background. I'm going to know that the bank manager, when he's granting a bond, is not going to want to do that if they call for the financials. And I know some of the banks do, and I know there have been bonds declined on this basis. So that's the big risk. And then, the example of to answer the question more directly, is that your body corporate is, everybody's doing the right things, and you're acting in the best interest of everybody. and there's a shortage of money to do certain things. For example, you may be painting or doing some large maintenance job. Now, accounting wise, again, I'm going to paint this. This is more Alistair's thing, but the body corporate doesn't own the buildings. Okay, so if you look at the financial statements of the body corporate, you don't usually see any buildings or land and buildings there, which you would see in a commercial outfit maybe, or on your own personal balance sheet. So there is no asset. So that's probably one of the first causes. If you throw money at the building, it's not necessarily increasing in value that it would in a normal personal situation. So you're going to do some maintenance to the building, and you might add something to the building, which might be an asset, but actually you're expending money on the building. So you might just say you spend R1 million on the building, you're not going to have a corresponding asset. So you're actually showing, if you've spent the money, you're going to be in overdraft. That's the point. If you borrow the money to do that work, you then have a further liability. You're borrowing, and of course there's interest on that. And there's not necessarily the body corporate. And this is the danger now that I'm seeing. The bodies corporate are short of money, and they're not wanting to increase the levies. So they would rather borrow the money to do the repair. Now, borrowing money is excellent. I actually believe in it. I promote it. I'm an ex-lender myself in my old job. But when you are, and you must borrow the money, because then you're getting the jobs done at today's prices. But I do believe you should consider raising a corresponding special levy, because if you've got a corresponding special levy, then you've got a corresponding asset to that liability. Does that make sense? That's my thinking.
Yeah, I think that's you know what, I think often people are not, not everyone in a building is from an accounting background, and I think it's important to know these things. Alistair,
Yes,
in
Marie.
your experience, do you think there's sufficient or provision made for expenditure on our budgets, on the annual budgets that are put forward towards the, to the owners who've got to approve them?
Marina, I think, look, obviously every building is unique in this instance. What I'd rather actually like to just turn that question around a little bit, because every building is unique and will have and I'd rather, if it's okay, give you a few pointers that I think are important to consider when you're budgeting, so that we're not getting into these precarious situations.
Yes,
we said earlier on that a business or the body corporate should be run as a business. And most businesses will not wait until post-year end to prepare their budget. So I think this is something for me where it's great that you have a managing agent that you can rely on, but I'm a big believer in that your trustees need to take ownership of these matters, particularly if it's their portfolio that they've been delegated. So don't wait till after year end to prepare your budget. 10 months in, 9 months in, you're going to have a pretty good idea of what your costs are, particularly your contractual costs. And if there's a relationship with a supplier, it's very easy to give them a shout. Guys, what are you anticipating in terms of an increase? Prepare that budget in advance of year end. Implement that. You have the 10% discretion, obviously, but if you can be more accurate and say, well, it's going to be a 7% increase, increase it from the first day of the start of the new financial year. Do not wait till you're 6 months down the track. Yes, you can recoup it, but keep it simple. Implement it as soon as you can. On that topic, there's always a cost sensitivity. Personally, I'm not a big believer in that cheapest is always the best, and I'll touch on this in a second. Before we get to the expenses, and I mentioned it earlier on, people need to check their income as well. The amount of buildings that we see when we're reviewing financials, exclusive use contributions that are not raised, that are just forgotten. They're on the plans or they're registered in the deeds office, forgotten. Mike, with your insurance premiums, there are requests for additional insurance on sections, not raised. Those are all lost revenue streams. It's not directly tied to the budgeting, but always, review your investments, review where your money is banked. Obviously, it's got to be in a safe investment, et cetera, but review those often. Don't let months go by. Have a look, because it's easy enough to transfer those things. It's a small It's a little bit about work, but it has its benefits. Right, so that's on the income side. Make sure you have all your income. Another small little tip, I think, and this is just, I think I always, sort of think of the old STA. Keep it simple, keep it transparent, keep it accurate. Review your contracts. First of all, try and align your contracts with your financial year. Make the person who's doing the budgeting, their lives are so much easier when they don't have to think, well, 3 months in, this is going up, and 4 months in. Align your insurance contracts to your financial year. Align your security contracts, whatever it may be, align it with your financial year so that you have one increase for that particular financial period. I think things people miss is when you're appointing contractors, you've got to compare apples with apples. Make sure that your contractors are correctly registered, if they have to be accredited some way. Make sure they have insurances in place, because all of these things, if you're going for the cheapest price, is going to cost you money in the long run, which is an unnecessary expense, which in turn can lead or aid in this process of insolvency. Or particular importance to me on that topic is your insurance. Don't always go with the cheapest. Compare apples with apples, because you may need to call on that policy, or you may need to make a claim. Make sure that you are getting the best value that you can for what you're paying. And the other one is the managing agents. I also believe don't necessarily go for the cheapest. It's a relationship. You need to work with that managing agent. And I do believe it's a partnership. The trustee is the managing agent. Look at what you are getting. Read the fine print very carefully. A big outflow on your budget is municipal expenditure. And this possibly talks again to what Mike mentioned earlier on. Don't necessarily go and borrow money. And here I can, I'm talking from personal experience. I was in a situation where the council took 3 years to bill us, and they wanted payment back in 1 year. And we were able to negotiate. I said to them, well, you've taken 3 years to bill us. I want 3 years to pay you back. And they agreed it, and there was no interest incurred. So where you can, with large amounts of money like that, put payment arrangements in place to avoid having to borrow money and incur interest. I think one that's often overmissed is legal fees. You need to build in a provision for legal fees in your budget, particularly if amounts are going to be taxed. There will be a shortfall. It's got to come from somewhere, so build that in. Another thing that I'm in favor of, and it doesn't have to be huge, build in a small contingency in your budget. It doesn't have to be huge, but there's always going to be something that happens. And even if that contingency is not used, it will be available as cash down the line. So you are increasing the size of your kitty. And I just want to check. Yeah, so basically, Marina, I think those are just little tricks, I think, where it comes to budgeting that can circumvent or assist in people falling into shortfalls, cash shortfalls, and really just applying their mind to preparing that budget in terms of timing, in terms of implementation, which all assists in, obviously, levy collection's a big part of it. But if you've got that part down pat, I think you're better off than a budget or a building that's recklessly managed that's going to lead you down that path of insolvency.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Alistair. I see Sandy said there's a petition going out for City of Ekurhuleni to stop council billing interims. They need to play their part too. Indeed, I agree with that. Absolutely. I think it's completely ridiculous that we're getting interim billings all the time, and hopefully we'll see some change there. But I mean, that's again lots of pressure from the community. Mike, if you could talk about 2 threats, what do you think are the biggest threats? I think you've mentioned one already, the renovation side, but yeah, talk us through the threats to insolvency, to the solvency of a building.
Okay, so it causes a spiral downwards. That's the part that's a bit gloomy if one is moving in the wrong direction. And just to go back to one of the causes before I go there, is another thing is, and we're talking about billing, is under recovery of, if you are recovering hot water or water charges and you're under recovering, you're not realizing that you're actually under recovering, and a year later you suddenly are in an insolvent position. So you've got to be careful for that too. Alistair, you might want to expand on that just now. But one of the biggest risks that I see is if an owner now wants to sell within that scheme, they're just all very well, it's all painted nicely now because the body corporate spent a lot of money to paint the buildings. Another owner is quite pleased because now he can sell or she can sell. So there you go, you put your property on the market and you sell it for $1 million or $2 million, and you got a good price, and now the purchaser goes off to the bank and the bank turns down the loan. So my question, and this is probably the biggest one, where do we stand now? Because now the bond got declined and the owner is saying, but hang on, it's not my fault that I wasn't managing this lot. Look at this. I now, Mr. Trustee, and Marina, it's a legal question really, I suppose. Where does it leave the trustees if they were not steering the ship in the right direction here? Would the trustees be at risk in terms of fiduciary responsibility and so on and so on? But then again, an AGM might have passed where everybody was just, people don't understand. You can present a wrong financial statement to a meeting sometimes and it'll pass because people don't necessarily understand the financial aspects. So it could even have gone through an AGM insolvent. So yeah, that's a risk, I think, that an owner won't be able to sell and then they're stuck until it's brought into a solvent position. And me as an owner, I might have a problem now because now maybe I've dropped my price to meet that sale and now I can't put my price up again. So I've suffered a financial loss, never mind that I can't sell, or it might mean that I can't buy the property that I want to buy because I can't sell. So I lost a bargain on the other side. I might be R500,000 down now. Who am I going to get compensation from? So that's a question mark. That's one. And then, of course, when a body corporate is insolvent, as Alistair explained, it's very difficult then to make payments. And then people tend to say, oh, the pavings are broken over there. You know what? We'll have to hold it until money comes in. And then, of course, you've got a slip and fall danger. And then the insurance company will not want to insure the building. So one of the biggest risks that we're seeing is when a body corporate is insolvent, the maintenance goes to pot. And I'm talking about not huge expensive maintenance, I'm talking about repairing paving, making sure that the tiles in the passageways are not cracked, the lights are working at night. And all of these risks, if they're not dealt with, the insurance are going to pull out and say, we're not insuring you anymore. We're giving you 30 days notice. So I'd say that's probably the second risk, Marina.
And you've seen that, Mike. I mean, I've received a lot of emails from you saying, I've had this happen now. A lot of buildings are facing that letter, that horrible letter that they received to say, sorry, insurance is being terminated. And I mean, let's just go quickly back to your question about trustees and whether or not the trustees who are the sort of head steering the ship, can they be sued in their personal capacities? And I think it's part of their fiduciary duty to manage a building with diligence and care and skill. And if you look at Regulation 14 of the Community Scheme Ombud Service Act, Regulation 14 talks about scheme executives having this increased responsibility to look around them for expert advice. We all know that people are not experts in this field, but there's an increased obligation on you now to make sure you surround yourself with experts in their fields to be able to give you guidance. And if you don't know, there's a specific obligation on you to go and find out. And I think that's where things fall down slightly. I just wanted to read that. Let me just see if I can find it here. I like that, Clive. Populist budgets by well-intentioned trustees are the stepping stones to downward spiral. Trustees and managing agents need to really identify future expenditure assertively. And I think that's an excellent word. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Alistair, let's talk about debt collection. I mean, that's how I started in the sectional title industry, was through collecting monies, sitting, typing summonses, and trying to get hold of money. And we're still doing it. And I must say, it's an extremely challenging environment. What are your thoughts about debt collection processes?
Yeah, Marina, look, I'll leave the legalese to you. Again, I'm going to try and revert back to sort of a more practical stance. I mean, we obviously know, that we have your budgets are approved at the AGM. We know that the notification needs to go within 14 days, and it needs to stipulate X, Y, and Z. Levy collection process, critical. You can have the best budget in the world. Obviously, if you're not collecting your levies, no go. But this is, again, I come back to what I said earlier on. I believe that you need a strong, interested board of trustees. My personal opinion is that managing agents, they have a lot on their plate. And a simple thing, and again, I'll take it back to personal experience. I think you need to have some sort of internal arrangement that works for you and the managing agent. So, I mentioned to Mike before we started the call that, I was a chairman for 10 years, and in the 10 years, I had one bad debt, which was handled by a very good firm of attorneys, but it was a sale and execution by the bank. Other than that, in 10 years, I did not have 1 cent of bad debt, but it was a very proactive process. The managing agent had me the levy roll on the 2nd of the month. I'd go through it, I'd send it back, and the processes were put in place. So I think it's a very interactive, proactive process. You cannot, there's all sorts of recommendations, wait until the 7th, institute legal action by the 15th of the following month. It needs to be done. Somebody needs to take ownership of that to prevent it. You can't 6 months down the line want to say, oh gosh, we should have, now we're in a pickle. So I think that it's very important to have that process in place. You obviously, you'd be able to provide more insight on how you feel CSOS, works in regard to the levy collection process. I personally like the court method, but, it's obviously cheaper to go to CSOS. I'm not sure what you feel about that, Marina.
So, Alistair, look, the thing is, I think that if you've got specialists working, it's all very well to give your arrear levy collection to a divorce lawyer. It's going to go on the back burner because they don't have relationships with the courts. They don't have that kind of thing. So I think if you've got a bulk kind of arrears, the court process does still work. It takes time. There's no doubt about it. But we are definitely seeing more and more Section 66 applications from our firm's point of view, where you're attaching a unit, attaching and selling. Also, we're going into the High Court with disconnection applications, which are working really well because that payment portion we're getting quicker. But the problem is when you've got a unit with no equity in it and you're trying to sell it in execution, what are you going to do? You won't even cover the bond. So there's a no sale, no bid. You can't be dealing with arrears of 300,000, 400,000 Rand. You're just not going to win. So we're taking the practical solution of asking the owner, the recalcitrant owner, to put a tenant in that unit so that the body corporate can get paid, over 10 years or whatever it might be. So we're trying, we're becoming sort of better tap dancers around debt. And I think we have to do that. Bev says, can an owner commission an insurance survey when there are concerns and no buy-in from trustees in terms of risk? I'm happy to answer that. Mike, you want to answer it?
I'll add to it. Off to you.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So basically, an owner can't themselves commission an insurance survey, but what an owner can do is, in terms of the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act, is call a meeting of the trustees. The trustees must call with if they've got 25, if she's got 25% support, telling them, what it's about. We want an insurance survey commissioned. If the trustees don't call that meeting within 14 days, then a meeting can be called by that concerned owner. And then at that meeting, you can get some direction and direct that the trustees do that with an ordinary resolution. So there is power in that. Mike?
No, absolutely. I think mine just would have been less legal in terms of what I was going to suggest.
Go ahead.
It's music to my ears that owners are concerned and that they're going to want things done. I've actually got a video recently that I put up on our channel that says, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, because people walk past broken things all the time and they do nothing about it. So owners should be involved. So I do encourage owners to take some sort of action, whether it be that call a special general meeting, but certainly send an email to the trustees and say, guys, there's broken stuff here. Well, the light's not working, please, are we going to do something about it? So, take a few steps, but I wouldn't go and do my own survey, because some people might do it with good intention, but you might be undermining what the trustees are doing as well. So that's just more from a practical point of view. There are great people that do surveys, by the way. And last week, previously on WIST, you had Maricia Robus on here speaking, and she was very dynamic, as you might remember. And I met her last week. And she's a good person that can come around and do a check of your common property and make sure and give you a list of things that need to be done. So encourage the trustees to use people like her. It doesn't have to be terribly expensive, particularly your roofs. And if you do that, you're certainly going to actually keep your insurance intact, if not reduce your premium over the longer term.
100%. Mike, I'm also into scaremongering. I think scaring trustees is also a very good tactic, just about, they're not buying into these things, but they do have that fiduciary duty. But what course of action would you take personally if you're working in a scheme and you get wind of this insolvent kind of situation? Well, what is your duty? What do you do?
What you mean as a broker?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got my duty is to advise, and so I have to bring it to their attention, because if we advise incorrectly, or we step back on our advice, we as brokers or financial advisors, what they call us these days, somebody could complain and say, well, where was the level, what sort of level advice was here? So I certainly do give the advice in writing where I can. Sometimes I'm a little bit more diplomatic. I would, whisper in the trustees' ears, guys, this is a problem. And if I put it in writing, then you've got a bigger problem, because I'm putting pressure on you, because if something happens and you've been aware of it, you could have a further problem. So I first, try and whisper in their ears, guys, maybe this and that. In my own scheme, even, I've had a chat to the trustees out of official things about things that I think should be done. But yeah, trustees are doing their best. I mean, let's not be paint all doom and gloom. Trustees do generally are doing their best.
You get some really good trustees in the schemes, I must say. You do.
But it's just minor things. I mean, I just do think that unknowingly, a lot of trustees are going down this hill, and it's a slippery slope down this hill, thinking they're doing the right thing with the right. Oh, we don't want to raise levies. Now that is good intention. You don't want to raise the levies, but you have to. I mean, just analogy of your doctor, what's it, Addsure? The medicine is going to be a special levy if you don't fix things, now.
And Mike, do the banks care?
The banks? Well, that is the worry. The banks are starting to ask more questions. They're looking, and I'm not saying all of them, but I'm aware that some of the mortgage departments are looking at that, are looking at the financials and saying no. But I haven't seen any repercussions. In other words, with an owner losing money as a result or getting upset. But what I see it as a risk that's there already, and I think it's going to get bigger, and I think problems are coming. That's why I contacted you about it, because I'm concerned from a risk point of view, that we could end up with trustee indemnity claims and so on and so on.
And I think the banks are also, they're happy enough when they're being paid the bond. And that's what I find in our collections practice. They're happy, with the levies up to 300,000 Rand, we contact the bank and say, look, this is a very big risk for you. Well, the guy's paying his bond. He's just not prepared to pay his levy. So they're okay. And I don't think that that's correct. I think banks should join us as when we're giving that alert that the levy is too high, the arrear levy is too high. I think they should come to the party, and perhaps we should get some bankers onto our webinar. I think that'll be a really, really good idea. So Alistair, in previous conversations, you mentioned that the lack of clear reporting lines was a bit of an issue in insolvencies. Talk us through that and maybe what potential remedies there are.
Marina, this is also, as I often say, I think a lot of stuff in sectional title is grey, certainly where the financials are concerned. So in a normal company situation, you have the company is insolvent, there's a process, there's a legal process documented that's followed. Nothing like it in the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act. And like I said, even so, all that's going to happen is generally people fall back on that Section 3. We can raise special levies, we fine. So I feel often, from our perspective as an auditor, who do we report it to? If we report it, there is no body. So if we had to report it to CSOS, what would happen? Would CSOS insist, for example, if that procedure or process was in place, that a EMA is appointed to run that scheme, and would it work on the same basis as an administrator? Would it be for a fixed term and then you reevaluate? And then what skill set would need to be attached to that EMA? Because as you and I both know, EMAs are appointed that maybe don't necessarily have a particular skill set. So it's very grey. Who do we report it to? What sort of timeframes do you put in for rectification? There's no penalties, there's no fines, there's nothing, this is the problem. It's what Mike alluded to earlier on too. There are no consequences. So we'll just insert the clause, we can make you paper solvent, but is it really being remedied? No, it's not. So personally, I think whether it be and this is just, these thoughts have come off the back of our initial sort of conversation about the webinar. I mean, obviously there's nothing in place, but obviously you can take a building to administration. I've done a bit of reading. It's obviously people say it's not the preferred approach. The good thing with that is it is for a defined period. The EMA, I suppose you could bring an EMA on board if your trustees are not doing what they're meant to do. Does it guarantee it's going to turn the scheme around? That depends on the skill set of the EMA, the levy collection process. So everything plays a part in that, but I do think that maybe if we looked at a process, so we get it in, we report that it's insolvent, there is a rectification period allowed, potential, and then a review once that time period is lapsed. Possibly failing, if that time period is lapsed, we then say, right, you've had the opportunity to correct it, it's not been done, we now need to put someone in place to look at correcting that. I don't know what the answer is, but as it stands, there are no, like I said, there are just no repercussions. And if people are generally disinterested, if you have maybe a managing agent that's not that great, you have a board of trustees that's not that great, it is a slippery slope. I'm not sure what the answer is. Yeah,
look, administration has always been slightly wishy-washy for me, and I'll tell you why over the years that I've been involved with it. I think that at the beginning it was in the High Court, right? And when we did applications to the High Court, I remember thinking to myself, gosh, we are the ones as attorneys who must put someone forward to the judge at the High Court as who's going to be the administrator. Then we were thinking, who do we know who's an administrator? And then you could have counted on one hand who an administrator is, because no one really wants that job. It shouldn't be a money-making job. If you have an administrator who's making money, it means something's wrong. And I've met administrators where something is very wrong. So that already was a big problem. Then you've got the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act of 2016, which talks about now going to the Magistrates Court. So Magistrates Court is the same kind of situation. Then in talks with the Community Scheme Ombud Service, they're talking about creating a panel of administrators specifically for community schemes.
Yep.
Okay, that's all very well and good, but I've also seen and had some experience with the CSOS panel of executive managing agents. And I can tell you that's a big concern for me. Because I'm not sure that the people who are qualified are on the panel. I don't know. That's yet to be seen. So, yeah, I don't know. Administration, it's good you come back. I haven't seen buildings really being turned around by being placed under administration, to be quite honest with you. So,
sorry.
Yeah, carry on.
No, I just feel like, again, it comes down, I think, very much to the skill set, potentially, because it is niche. I often, as simple as sectional title is meant to be, it is niche. You do need to understand. So I think if you're going to have a panel of any sorts looking over this, and that, people can approach, maybe it doesn't even have to get to the point where someone reports. It could, I mean, obviously administration can be, you can voluntarily approach as it is, but if CSOS, for argument's sake, has that facility available, whoever is appointed to that panel, in my opinion, should demonstrate either, the relevant qualification or significant experience in the industry. There needs to be a clarity on how they're going to get this or attempt to get this scheme from an insolvency back to a solvent state. And that takes a certain skill set. So there has to be a review process on who sits on that panel. Absolutely.
Correct. And again, it's about who the experts, who the people in charge, and who are the surrounding people to that building. Joanne says a salute to the good trustees, but what when trustees are not giving attention to serious matters like unlawful extensions? When one tries to address such issues you picked on, whether on the trustee level or as an owner, surely this should be transparent to auditors and it impacts owners financially. Yeah, look, Joanne, I agree. And I think the auditors will pick up mismanagement and problems. Now we also talk in another space that Alistair and I have spoken about. It's not for this webinar. Perhaps we'll have a webinar exactly on that. But, we need those auditors. We need professional auditors to be able to do those kind of investigations. Independent reviewers are not going to dig so deeply into a scheme. And I think that's, that's what we need to look at. So, yeah, everybody's got to have an increased responsibility. People are going to hate me for saying that because already our managing agents and portfolio managers are stressed out as it is in terms of their increased corporate governance responsibilities. Mike, you've got a couple of minutes. Would you like to raise anything else as a top of mind?
Yeah, I will say something, Shem. I would feel terrible if I didn't say this today. I'll actually echo what you were saying regarding your experience with administrators. Mine has not been good either, because obviously we look at insurance aspects there. But I met one the other day. So in defense to the one out there that I know is good, I went to their office in Midrand. I won't mention their name here. And they actually showed me, they gave me a slide presentation of how they had fixed a building and turned it around, and I was most impressed. So let's not write them off completely. I was really impressed, and it just showed me, and it gave me some hope that it can be done if you've got the right person, and as Alistair says, the right skill set.
Absolutely, and it's about professionalizing the industry, professionalizing on every level.
And using professionals, because they would call in people like Aubrey's Sneyman, who's I see on board this morning, and a few others to help do the fixings, getting the EOAs right and getting everything in place. So, if you've got the right people, I've spoken to legal people that don't know what a rule is, believe it or not. I've been to a trustee meeting with an attorney that turned up to fight a case, turned to the managing agent and asked what are these rules. So it's really, you must find the right people to do the job. Just on the insurance point of view, though, it does spiral, as I said, downwards very, very quickly. And one of the things that we've got to be mindful of, I think it's easy for us as suppliers to the industry to voice our opinions, but there is some realities which I'm seeing. And I do try and understand exactly. I'm even boasting our marketing to say that we try to understand your position. And I think one of the problems a managing agent is faced with, if you put yourself in their shoes, is that if they go out and are too assertive, I know, Clive, I know you used the word. I see Clive's here this morning. And Clive, 10 out of 10, I know you are really assertive. You get things done. You get those roofs checked every year and all sorts of things. But some managing agents do have to tiptoe, because otherwise they lose. You can have a 300-unit scheme, And if the managing agent comes in hard at an AGM and says, you need a special levy to fix this, that's the medicine, they're out of there. They're going to get another managing agent that's going to be a more popularist one. So I think that's just the reality we've got to understand. It's kind of the backdrop in what we're doing. But I think we have to fix it because, you know, it is going to hurt later. It's going to hurt hard if you're not doing the right things. Yeah, that's my comment.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks very much. We appreciate you, Mike from Addsure. Always a loyal player, key player in the industry. Thank you. Alistair, any parting shots from you?
Yeah, I think, Marina, just to touch on what Mike has said, and I guess it all comes back to that budget again, you know, don't always go for the cheapest. It has its it may have consequences down the track. And I can, you know, you're going to paint your complex, you know, you're going to choose the cheaper paint. It's going to last you 2 years. Whereas if you've gone paid a little bit more and gone with a more expensive paint, you've got 5 years worth of coverage. And I think the same can be said on all your service providers. Goedkoop is dierkoop. Just be mindful of that when you're budgeting. Yeah,
100%, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, and there, Paul de Stadler also. Goedkoop is dierkoop, and Bev says ethics and transparency from all stakeholders, win-win for all. That's like music to my ears. Absolutely, 100%. I think also one needs to bear in mind that managing agents are, again, stressed out. They've got so much to do. So those trustees and owners who are on this webinar, just bear that in mind and also try to assist from that point of view. Some exciting news, just for interest's sake. Women in Sectional Title has been requested to become involved in the CSAS's transformation programs and sessions, which will be taking place during May. I'm very excited to be part of that because we also need to see transformation in our industry. And yeah, take this opportunity to thank you all again. ZFIN, Sectional Title Solutions, We Connect You, PKF Octagon, Alistair's from PKF Octagon, and Multiprof. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you guys. We appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing everybody again next month. Thanks very much.